And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. What's going on? It's Offside Hockey Talk, proudly brought to you by Boxing Rocks Brewing Co.'s Puck Off Laugardale, a delicious beer for the big game. And of course, we're joined by Terry Koshan. And if you can't figure it out, I don't know which side the camera's on, so I'll point that way and hopefully it's right. Terry, lots to talk about in Leafland. Obviously, the trade deadline is passed, goaltending woes, the Boston game. How's everything been in your world, first off?
Everything's fine. Just kind of trucking through. And I'm like everyone else, James. When March 21 at 3:01 p.m. Eastern hit, I think we could all let our shoulders relax a bit and move on. Especially that day. Usually, Dubas seems to have something cooking in the pot a little bit later. But when we got word that day that he was going to be speaking right around 3 o'clock, we knew that nothing late was happening for the Leafs. So good to get that done and out of the way. And then, like everyone else, you concentrate on the last 4 or 5 weeks here and look forward to the playoffs.
Yeah, well, definitely. Well, let's start there. We'll use the trade deadline as a jumping off point.
Sure.
Want to ask you about the acquisitions the Leafs made, and also maybe something that didn't happen that maybe you heard was cooking. The Leafs obviously were looking for a veteran defenseman. They got one in Giordano. They were looking for, let's just call it a pain in the ass type player, which Blackwell definitely fits the bill for. Like what he's brought so far down in the bottom six. For you, what do you grade the Leafs trade deadline day as?
I'd say B plus, because James, I'd go back to not just including that, but the acquisition of Lyubushkin,
Yep.
who I think has been a revelation for them. There's no doubt. And you look at that trade initially and go, okay, Kyle Dubas gets out from underneath the mistake that he made in signing Richie to a 2-year contract. It didn't work out. Good, he gets that off the books, and really that's all you want at that point. Get Richie out of Toronto, and that's that. Well, you get a very serviceable defenseman in Lyubushkin back. He's coming at an element they didn't have. We know that now. And one of these guys, last year was weird, of course. We didn't really see anybody play other than what was happening in the North Division. And, kind of fly under the radar a bit. But he's coming and done a nice job for Toronto. So I lumped that in with what Dubas did on March 21, or I guess March 20th, which was to get to Giordano and Blackwell from Seattle. Didn't give up anything that he didn't want to give up in the first rounders or any of the prospects the Leaf has, which I think was key. If you can look at it that way, we apparently they went down the road with Fleury a bit. It didn't happen. I guess you're rolling the dice, but with the goaltending, but Mrazek's come back and done good things before he got hurt last night. So I like what he did because Giordano has come in and formed a really effective pair with Liljegren. I mean, you look at it on paper right away, James, and what do we think is going to happen? Well, he's going to wind up with Brody at some point. That could still happen. We still have some time here to go before the playoffs, so we could see that. Keefe said it would probably get a look, but he's been great, fit in right away. When you're getting a veteran, a 38-year-old veteran who's won the Norris Trophy, there's not going to be much of an adjustment period for him, and we saw that there wasn't. And I think Colin Blackwell's been better the last couple of times out, scoring his first goal last night. So I think Dubas did fine. I mean, he had his hands tied a bit. Obviously, we know that with the salary cap issues and everything else. Didn't get a goalie, but keep the fingers crossed that Jack Campbell comes back here fairly shortly, refines the form he had that got him to Vegas for the All-Star game, and you move on. But yeah, I like what Dubas did on the 20th, 21st.
No, I like the moves, and you're right. The Lyubushkin deal should not be overlooked. Obviously, getting Nick Ritchie's cap off there, but a guy that actually fit seamlessly with Morgan Riley.
Yeah,
it allows Brody.
Yeah, you don't when they acquire him, you don't necessarily think, okay, throw him with Riley and see what happens. But that's what they've had to do, and it's worked. And good for Lyubushkin. He's come in and, like I said, he's played an honest game. We'll see what comes out of this Taylor Hall sucker punch that he took last night. Hopefully, he's not injured for a long term or anything like that. I know Morgan Riley was saying just after the game, James, that he had talked to Lyubushkin and he seemed okay. But that's also not with that's not coming from a team doctor either. So we'll know more on Thursday following the morning skate prior to the game against Winnipeg. But you just gotta like what he's come in and provided for them, because a lot of that they didn't have.
Well, we talked a lot about the fact, and you've talked about this before, about Jake Muzzin being the guy that carried the load physically on the back end for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and how much toll that might take on a guy. Now you have Lyubushkin doing that, and Giordano to some extent. So it takes some of that bearing off of Muzzin when he does come back. But the thing I like the most about the Giordano acquisition is it's kind of solidified Timothy Liljegren.
Yeah.
It's brought him along, and to hear the words that Giordano used his first game with Liljegren, talking about his poise and how he played with the puck and how he was very confident out there, and he's really in his own with his abilities. He was very speaking gleamingly, and a guy who's won the Norris Trophy, you don't take that as a grain of salt.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's another pair now that the Leafs may be able to move forward with, not having again to pair him with Brody, allowing Brody to move freely throughout, I guess, your defensive corps and go where he needs to. And TJ Brody is such a calming influence. He's the guy who breaks up like how many 2-on-1s a game.
Yeah.
So I like the ability to put him with a guy that might struggle, whether it's Hall or maybe Muzzin coming back off the injury. You put him with Brody where it's a kind of a safety blanket, so to speak.
Well, Brody's that type of guy you put with anyone and their game jumps up, right? And we've seen that. I mean, he's a perfect way to put it, calming influence and all that. Listen, he's had a bit of a rough go here, a couple of weird deflections. We saw another one last night, but that's not typical of the way he plays the game, especially defensively. The active stick is so good. Like you say, breaking up a lot of bottom end rushes, that sort of thing. So we'll see how. I'm curious to see how it all plays out, James, before the playoffs start. 2 or 3 weeks ago, if you had told me that Liljegren might be a playoff regular, I would have said, okay, well, who's hurt? But you're right. He has done a good. He has done a good job with Giordano, and he's brought out the best in the kid, I think. But again, playing with some poise that is important. Does that last over the long haul of playoff series? We'll have to see. But if everyone's healthy going in, and the status of Rasmus Sandin remains unclear at this point, I'll be curious to see who Sheldon Keefe of the 8, which 2 he decides to sit. But what you're getting right now, you have to like the Giordano Liljegren pairing. It's a good sign for the Leafs. When a brother becomes more than that, we'll have to see. But you really have to like what they're bringing. And Giordano is just you talk again, someone who played in the West the whole time, right? So we know what he's doing in Calgary. We briefly saw him in Seattle, wasn't there very long, but when you see the player night in and night out, you have a greater appreciation for what he does. Even a guy who won the Norris Trophy like he did a few years ago. So so far the returns have all been excellent with Giordano, and we see what's happening now with Lillard.
Yeah, well, that's definitely, and that also gives the Leafs time with a guy like Sandin. If this pairing does well, you don't have to rush Sandin back. You don't have to worry about him coming in immediately and having to have an impact. We'll look at the 2 injuries, though. I mean, Justin Hall, don't quite know what's going to happen there.
Right.
Have you heard anything about Justin Hall? Is it just a cut? Is it concussion?
Well, nothing yet. I mean, they're off today, and the Leafs are
Yeah.
pretty tight-lipped on these things on off days. So we're gonna hit with. I think we're gonna get hit with a barrage of news tomorrow morning after this. We'll know what the skate. The Leafs take after a day off. They do a full morning skate with line rushes and everything else, not an optional. So being off today, we should have a fairly good indication tomorrow morning before Sheldon speaks who will be in and out of the lineup. But we'll have to see. It's another tough break for Hall, right? Just got the visor off or the full shield off, and he gets hurt on a fluke play. And you have to hope that Hall's all right, and ditto for Lyubushkin. Like I say, we'll find out in the morning and then go from there.
Well, we'll talk about this real quickly. With the injuries that has happened to the Leafs defense, if they are out, does that push the timetable forward trying to get Jake Muzzin in the lineup? And second to that, for Petr Mrazek obviously getting hurt, we see Jack Campbell taking his own net, taking shots and reps and things like that. Does that move his timetable up? Or do the Leafs look at it and say, hey, we're comfortably in a playoff spot. No one is catching us. Whether we go to a wild card spot, third, second, or first in the Atlantic, we're in. We have the time on our side to let these guys rest, and may it be whatever our opponent is in the first round, we can let these guys get to 100%.
Well, it's never been Kyle Dubas's way to speed up the recovery of injured players because there have other injuries have happened. They find a way to make it work. So I don't think you're going to see that with Muzzin or Campbell. Now, in Muzzin's case, kind of like Campbell, get through a full practice with the team and everything. Campbell, like you say, had his own net in Boston for the morning skate, but it's one thing to be in a morning skate. It's another to go for a hard 30 or 40-minute practice. Leafs will have that on Friday. Didn't have it today. Have it on Friday before they head out on their 4-game trip. So we'll have to see. Ditto for Muzzin, and but I don't think they're gonna. Those things will be sped up by anything that's happening on the exterior. they're going to be back when they're ready to go. We'll see what happens cap wise with all that sort of thing. But yeah, the Leafs have never rushed anything under Kyle Dubas, and I don't think they're about to start. And like you say, James, they're in a good, they're in a playoff spot.
Yeah.
Would you want to win the division? Of course you do. Do you want home ice? Of course you do. You're in the playoffs today. You're not. That's not going anywhere.
Yeah, it's not changing. And that's why my philosophy would be, and I've told you this, we said this last year too with Freddie, get everybody healthy and then have a full complement running through the playoffs, which is something the Leafs really haven't done. I mean, they went into last year's playoffs severely banged up. Austin Matthews with the wrist, Jake Muzzin ailing. So, I mean, this may be the healthiest they might get to go in. Touch on Jack for just a second. The rib injury, obviously, Morgan Riley kind of alluded to it was something he was dealing with for a little while. That could have affected his play.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you look at, say, okay, I don't know about you, but if I got a rib injury, let alone breathing, I don't know about playing in an NHL game and taking physical contact, how well that would hold up for a regular average Joe, but he is playing through it. Do you get a sense of where he's at and how long he might be? I mean, obviously, like we just said, taking a net's one thing, taking a full practice is another. Is it a long-term thing, do you think, for him, or are we on the cusp of seeing him back the next couple of weeks?
I think I think even sooner than that. And again, I don't think the Mrazek injury speeds it up, but for the way the schedule looks now, James, Thursday night at home against Winnipeg, Friday practice in Toronto, at Philly Saturday. I would assume that they will practice on Sunday, likely in Florida. It is in Tampa on Monday night, right?
It is Tampa Monday night, Florida. Yeah,
I'm assuming they'll practice Sunday in the Tampa area, because they will take the Wednesday they won't be on the ice. They'll be coming off a back-to-back, and you're going to be traveling to Dallas. So there's a couple of practices there for him to get into. Will they deem that one on Friday is enough and play him against Philadelphia? We'll have to see. But what did Keith say to us yesterday? At this point, you can consider it day to day. So I take him at his word for it, because all of the things that Campbell's been doing, he's been getting through these workouts, on ice workouts, fine. And as far as a rib injury goes, we don't know, is it a muscle or is it a bone? I think there's probably two different things there. You're right. If you have a rib muscle injury, breathing, let alone playing net in the National Hockey League or anywhere else, would be a task, I would think. I don't know from experience. I've never had a rib injury. But if it's a bone bruise, maybe it's something different. But again, the illusion has been made that he had been dealing with something, and it didn't happen in that last game. I think it was Seattle on March 8th that he played. That so it might have been lingering, but you know what? The Leafs have come out of it. I mean, would you have liked to win some of those games against lesser opponents? Well, Campbell's won it, of course. But here they are again, keeping their heads above water in the top three in the Atlantic Division. So they managed to get through it. Mrazek rebounded nicely after going on waivers. I don't think anyone saw that coming.
No,
I certainly didn't, and many others didn't. But no, I think Campbell's around the corner here. He won't. He's not going to play against Winnipeg, but I would imagine that Philadelphia is a possibility if he gets through the Friday practice. Okay.
Now, talking about the Winnipeg game, we're going to run through some more players here in a couple moments, but the Winnipeg game keeps coming up. So let's talk about that for a second. It's going to be a physical game after what happened last game between these two teams and all the hoopla afterwards. I know players say that, they checked that at the door or whatever, but we seen last night with Marchand and some of these guys, things do get remembered and brought forward. And I could see that happening tomorrow night in the Winnipeg game. I was really hoping to have Peter Mrazek between the pipes, because obviously a veteran guy can settle it down. Winnipeg, I think, is going to be an ornery bunch. They really want to make a push for the playoffs. That window is closing daily for them to get in. It's going to be a physical game, and you hope a guy like Lyubushkin can be in there as well. Hall's been throwing his weight around a little bit too. What do you think tomorrow night's going to be between these two teams? Is it going to be fireworks, which everybody seems to expect? Everybody's building up the anticipation that something's going to crack off here. Or is it going to be two teams that are going to take care of their business and move forward, knowing what time of year it is?
Well, the Jets can't afford to play around. You have to give the Jets credit. When they came out of the All-Star break, they were 9 points out of a playoff spot. Sorry. They've lessened that gap to 3 points now going into tonight. It could be even less tomorrow, or if they win in Buffalo tonight. So I don't know, but having said that, there was the issue with Neil Pionk last year and Mitch Marner. Now I know that the teams played after that against each other, and that didn't come to the fore again. But I'm talking about the push on the empty net goal.
Yep, I know you're talking about.
Yeah, and then what happened in Winnipeg in December. Referring to obviously the Spezza suspension, Pionk getting 2 games for the knee on Sandin. Does it carry over? I would think not. It could. I say that only because of where Winnipeg is in the standings. I mean, the Leafs don't want to get into shenanigans either here against a team they're not going to see again this season. What's the point? But you know what? The players are players, and if they deem it necessary to get at some of these things, then they will. But just with Winnipeg is we're in the standings, James. I would be very surprised they're going to be looking for anything extra tomorrow and take any risk of putting that group of Toronto players on the power play. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, well, no, Toronto's power play for the limited amount of time they get, by the way, is pretty darn lethal. I think it's still first in the NHL. Boston learned that firsthand last night. I agree with you. I think Winnipeg's going to put their heads down and try to win this game, obviously, and narrow that gap or even creep their way into a playoff spot, which is crazy to think the Vegas Golden Knights may not make it. After all the acquisitions and different things, maybe it might actually come to fly in their face that you can't just keep shipping guys out and messing with the roster. And then the Dadnov situation, that may be just the hockey god smiling down saying, you got to keep him. He's going to score, but you guys might not make it and you're not going to like it.
Yeah, that's a crazy situation there. It seems that the better the players that Vegas gets, the worse off they become. Doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense, but that's we get into the conversations here, James, about some of the challenges the Leafs have cap wise. There's no comparison to what's going on in Vegas.
No, that's a whole different kettle of fish.
Yeah, when you have that situation and you can't put the proper team on the ice because of it on any given night, that's tough. And we'll see what happens. But Vegas is in that conversation. Vancouver is not going away completely, and the Jets have clearly made it clear that they're not giving up this fight either. Dallas Stars either. So it's going to be fascinating to see who makes it out of the West in that group.
Yeah.
We know in the East it's done, so there has to be a little bit of suspense, and thank goodness they're supplying that in the Western Conference because, as we know, the top 8 in the East have been settled since, I don't know, the last time we talked, which was months ago.
Yeah, no, it definitely has, and that's why I said for the Leafs. I mean, there's no rush or no worry. You're making it. There's no way a team is catching you and grabbing you there. I want to ask though, trade deadline. We didn't get to ask this question, so there was a little bit of kerfluffle between two Kyles over the Marc-Andre Fleury incident. How did you read that room after that happened when Kyle Dubas addressed it to the media and didn't like the fact that it got out? Obviously, it made its way to the Board of Governors meeting as well. It wasn't tabled by the Maple Leafs, but it was tabled by someone else about leaks. So obviously, it's something that caught the eye and the ire of other GMs to the point where Davidson had to address it. And I wouldn't say apologize, but just put it out there on the floor that it did get out, and going forward it'll be better, and that the relationship has been mended. But how do you feel on your side of things, and what vibe did you get? Because it seemed like he was pretty pissed off.
He was, and you know what? I think we'll look back and chalk this up to a mistake made by an inexperienced GM in Chicago, right? It's a difficult spot for Dubas because the Leafs are a pretty tight organization that way. And that was, people can argue all they want about Lou Lamoriello and everything. I have a lot of respect for the man and the job he's done in the league. But that was something that Kyle learned from Lou, was that airtight lid, if you will, on these types of things. And the Leafs are good at keeping that stuff in house. And most of the time, you hear names and everything and kicking tires and this guy and that. I know there's a lot of that stuff going into the playoff, or going into the deadline. Sorry, James, but this was different. This was pretty factual what you're looking at here. So, Kyle, I think Dubas was upset because, if you look at the package that allegedly was going to go back the other way, you're trading Travis Dermott, so that's not a big deal. But he'd said he wanted to hold on to his prospects and Matt Nyes and the picks and all that sort of thing. But, what does it say to Jack Campbell and his recovery if you're trying to get Marc-Andre Fleury, right? And that becomes public. And if that trade never happens, and that doesn't become public, then, the goaltender in Toronto now is trying to come back from this rib injury who you have said is your number one guy and you're confident in, never knows that was on the table. Everyone does now. I think they move on. It's unfortunate that it played out this way, but I think it's like I say, a lesson learned for Davidson in Chicago. And on Dubas's end, what more can you say to anybody? I don't know how how forceful GMs are in talking to each other about what don't leak this, don't leak that. I mean, I'm not sure if those things
Yeah.
ever come up in conversations. That's assumed, but it's a lesson learned on all sides. I guess you move on, but in the grand scheme of things, James, I think the worry for Dubas perhaps is what impact it may or may not have on Campbell. If Campbell's the stronger guy that he's led us to believe that he is, with the way that his game has come around this year and last year, the way that he thinks it's going to come around again, then I don't think this is going to bother him. I don't think it'd be an issue. But the day it happened, there's no doubt, you don't see that type of reaction from Kyle Dubas very often, if at
Yeah.
all. And that
He's
was a
very
little bit
sharp with
new
his
for all.
words.
Yeah, exactly. So, water under the bridge. Like I said, I don't think it'll have an impact on Jack Campbell one way or the other as he tries to get his game back here in the final 3 or 4 weeks.
One thing for me for this situation, it kind of reminded me of when the Leafs went and got Jonathan Bernier when they had James Reimer. And I bring
Mhm.
this up a lot because I really think that it really affected James Reimer's confidence with the Maple Leafs when they brought Jonathan Bernier in, because Reimer had gone and got them to the playoffs and done all these different things.
Yeah.
And really, it kind of roused your confidence. Oh, I did this for you, but now I'm not good enough. You're going to get somebody else. I wonder if that same cause and effect with Campbell now knowing, hey, they may have gone and got Marc-Andre Fleury. Would this been in my net, or
Mhm.
would Fleury be there to guide me? I know you're saying that he may be all right with it, but at the same time, the optics play the same to me when the Leafs did that with Bernier bringing it over Reimer. Those two didn't mesh well together, became a problem. We won't get to see what that dynamic will be like here because
Mhm.
obviously Fleury's not coming. He's in Minnesota. But still, for Jack Campbell, it's like, damn, I thought I was a guy. I thought this is my net, my crease, and you want me to be here long term, apparently. So, what's the real story here?
Yeah, I would imagine Dubas talked to Campbell about it. And I just don't see it having. If Jack Campbell falters when he comes back, James, I don't know that would have anything to do with it. It could be continuation of the way his game was going before he went out. But he's the guy now, and he knows that. This Mrazek injury, we'll have to see how long Mrazek's out. But no matter what happened, March 20th, 19th, 18th, March 21st,
Yeah.
the fact of the matter is Marc-Andre Fleury is a Minnesota Wild, and Jack Campbell's a Maple Leaf, and that's that. And I don't. If Jack Campbell's in net on May 3rd or 4th, whatever game one is, the first round of the playoffs, that's not going to be going through his mind during the national anthem. That could be fine.
No, he's going to be winning games and obviously padding the lines on the contract, so to speak. We're just going to pause for 1 second here. Proudly say that we're brought to you by Boxing Rock Brewing Co. Right there, seen on the puck. Absolutely delicious beer, the sponsor of this show. And we will bring in the other man of the show right here, finally available for us, Mr. Josh Egan.
How's it going, boys?
Hey, Josh.
Gents?
There we
What's going on,
are.
brother?
So we were just running through the Jack Campbell situation with the Marc-Andre Fleury trade that didn't happen, and just talking about where Jack's mind will be at. And obviously, you probably heard some of that. The next thing I want to ask you about last night in Boston, that game kind of got out of hand. Brad Marchand with the 10-minute misconduct. Obviously the Lyubushkin hit on Hall, then the sucker punch from Hall. How did you view that situation there? Do you think the Lyubushkin hit was on the numbers? It looked like Hall turned and, he got him basically shoulder, not back. And then obviously we've seen Hall get up, not to mention the player coming out of the penalty box doing the old corkscrew with the stick as well before he was out of the box, which is another topic in itself. How did you view that whole situation, Terry, as it went down last night?
Well, it just there was no call on the hit, right? And I thought what Hall did was a little bit much of a reaction. Obviously, you sucker punch a guy who's unsuspecting. I mean, that's the epitome of a sucker punch, or the definition of one, and it puts the Leafs in a tough spot. I think the bigger thing for me out of the game is that the Leafs feathers were not ruffled at all. It said, okay, fine, we'll play 4 defensemen, and we're still going to outplay you and beat you in your own building, and that's what happened. And I think that for the bigger picture, that was that kind of victory for the Leafs that last night was important, especially the building it came in. I mean, those guys weren't around in 2013. course, but they have been around in a little more recent years. Some of them have been, at least, and
Yep.
we know what kind of memories that building holds. So for the Leafs to pull together like that, do it with 4D, with a kid in net who hasn't played a heck of a lot, although he has been good for them, I just think it spoke to the team's character. And the hit itself, I don't know. I think the NHL could have taken a little bit of a longer look at it, obviously, just in comparison to some of the other things that have happened. That didn't happen. And if you're the Leafs now, you keep your fingers crossed that Lyubushkin is not out here for a while. But when you take a punch like that to the jaw, you fall down, you don't come back. You're not faking that.
No.
You're already down to defenseman. He's not staying out of the game just to for whatever reason other than that he would be injured. So tough spot for the Leafs. You have to like what they did last night in forgetting about it and just shrugging and keeping their pedal down and winning the hockey game.
Well, it's the inconsistency, right? Like, because
Josh, sorry, the inconsistency. If you and I are 90 or 100, we will still be talking about it.
Oh yeah,
it's never going to go away. It's something that sucks for everybody. Nobody's perfect, and I'm not defending the referees, but I'm just saying that this will be a discussion long after we're gone, all three of us. It will never change unless the NHL goes to robots as for officials. But at that point, you could probably find an issue with it. But the inconsistencies are difficult to handle. But the fact of the matter is, you're not going to get perfection out of the men in straight. Just like you don't get perfection out of the players themselves. I mean, it's just not something that's ever going to happen. But I understand too that the boiling point for fans is it gets a little bit higher when things like this happen.
Yeah,
certainly was high. Should have been high a few weeks ago when Matthews doesn't get called in overtime, and that is a direct income on that game. You hate to see what happens if the Leafs are appointed of something when this all ends on April 29th. You look back at that game and say, okay, would they have won that if there's a penalty called on Matthews and Chychrun doesn't go score?
Yeah.
So I understand there's a lot of frustration, but this is a thing where, man, it's just.
Yeah, it'll never be perfect. Never, not even for a moment. But I mean, at the same time, there's times where it goes in your favor too, right? So
there are, but you have to remind yourself of that if you're Leaf fans after what happens last night, that there are times that does go in the favor. Now, the frustration builds too when you look at suspension of Spets early in the year, which did get shortened to 4 games, and people would argue that the 2 for Matthews for what he did to Rasmus Dahlin was a little, maybe a game longer than it should have been, but. I would say to you that the fan bases and teams across the league, this is not something that solely happens in Toronto. These frustrations, 31 other.
No, I think the main boiling point for Leafs fans is being, I think, at the bottom end of penalties called for in the league with players like Matthews and Marner and Tavares and Riley.
You're right on that, definitely.
That raises a big question mark for a lot of fans of why there are fewer penalties. And we talked about this to jump off the beginning of the show, how the Leafs are first in the NHL on the power play with the limited opportunities they get. So that is one thing I could see maybe the Leafs management. I mean, Kyle Dubas was laughing about it at the Board of Governors meeting when they asked him about the refereeing inconsistency. All he could do was laugh because obviously if you say anything else, you're getting fined. But to go back to that Boston game, something that I wanted to bring up was a lot of fans were upset and kind of chirping about the fact, hey, you dressed Clifford in the lineup for these exact situations. Why isn't he going out there and gooning it up? Well, for me, you're not going to go out there and goon it up because you're winning. If you start playing into that game with Boston, you're playing right into their hand. You're playing with what they want you to do. So why would you do it?
There's no point in that. And you see what happened. The Bruins remained frustrated. Look at Marchand at the end of the second period.
Yeah.
I don't know what he was waving a stick at Francois Saint-Laurent for, but
he had no time for that either. He threw him right
away. I mean, it's there is no score for Clifford to settle in a situation. This is just me in that situation. All he has to do is go hard on his shifts, and if he wants, point at the scoreboard. He's going back to the bench.
Yeah.
Right? So that's it. That's what he has to do in that situation. I didn't have any problem with it last night. This is not a case of why aren't the Leafs sticking up for themselves or anything.
I think they did a good job of that last night anyways.
They did.
I like the game they played. I think recently, and this could just be me, but they played a lot more physical recently.
Well,
I think Clifford was there for more of a just in case situation, right? Like if it got even more out of hand, then all right.
Well, I think
Clifford,
so
you're-
too, Josh. But
you know.
also, Wayne Simmons hasn't done much to deserve to stay in. The other
Yeah.
interesting thing tomorrow is, against Winnipeg, will we see Abruzzese come in or not? I mean, there seemed to be a bit of indication of the skate in Boston that didn't happen, of course. But I don't know. Does he get in having not practiced? I mean, Harvard was knocked out toward the end of last week. I think it was Thursday. We know that Tuesday was his first day back on the ice. Does he get in after a couple of morning skates? That might seem like a little bit much, but we'll have to see. But Clifford, didn't drop his gloves with anybody. I don't think that was warranted last night. The Leafs just, like I said earlier, shrugged and just went out and won. And,
I think we probably see him Saturday against the Flyers.
That would be more. So. That would be more what I would think too. You get a full practice on Friday. You get used to your line mates. Like even the kid was saying yesterday, already noticing a difference in the intensity and the pace just off the morning skate from the NCAA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, off a morning skate, guys. There's no physicality. There's nothing like that.
Yeah,
you're not exactly seeing 100% pedal to the metal in the morning skate. So if he's seeing that already, I would be very surprised if they put him into a full game before he's had a full practice. I'm with you on that, Josh.
Let me ask this question here. This narrative has been out there too, and I'm kind of read into this one. There's a lot of guys on the Marlies like Steves and the like that have really worked hard this season, done well as well, and could be deserving of a chance. A guy comes off the NCAA, gets signed, he's right up with the big club, and you're talking about noticing the intensity off that. Does that kind of get a stick in the craw, or does it motivate you more? As a guy on the Marlies, to want to do a little bit more to get up. Because, I mean, if you're doing everything that they're asking you to do and excelling pretty much like a guy like Steve's, do you think that kind of teases you off a little bit that this guy's coming right in and sliding into a roster spot here?
Well, I think it would do both. It would cheese you off and motivate you that much more. Not that guys, I don't know how much motivation each person needs or what situation he's in, but if that was me in that spot, sure it would piss me off. Definitely.
Yeah.
You have to look at it this way too. Who's getting an opportunity and for how long? Do we really expect any of these guys to come in and make long-term impacts well into May or June? I think you're asking for a lot there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Leafs Nation has anointed Matthew Nyes as the next Austin Matthews, so maybe he comes in and has some impact.
He's 19 years old. He's not the next anything yet.
No,
like, come on. Let's take a.
Trust me, I agree with you. I'm just laughing and shaking my head.
Yeah, so that he still has a couple of weeks at least. I mean, he could be playing till April 9th, so there wouldn't be anything too quick after that. But if you want to have them in and see what they look like, fine. But if the Leafs are looking at college players and thinking they're going to make an impact in the playoffs, then perhaps they're not as deep as they like to think they are. But I just don't see it happening though. Sheldon Keefe likes his group. Does one of them get a shot ahead of a Simmons or a Clifford here in the next little while, perhaps? Then we'll see what injuries have to play, right? What role they have to play. Do they get the Leafs, get a bit lucky and not get hurt any more injuries before now at the end of the season? But you're asking for a heck of a lot for players of that age. And I know Abruzzese is 3 years older, 22, to come in and be difference makers. No experience. That doesn't happen.
No, definitely. Well, let's ask another question here. Obviously, we talked about the goaltending. Now Josh is here. Mrazek probably going to be on the shelf for just a little bit. Campbell still, we talked about not rushing him back. Who do you see backing up Eric Källgren? Is it going to be, obviously, Joe Wool? I don't know if he's 100% ready to go either. There's a guy down in the ECHL who's tearing it up, Petrozelli. Does he come through the ranks like a Reimer did and back him up? Or are we looking at somebody that we are not talking about here, like Hutchinson?
Well, it's probably Hutch again, I would think. Hutchinson.
Yeah, it's got to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really the only issue, the only option they've got right now, given the injuries and everything else. But you know what? Hey, listen, look at the silver lining with this. Källgren has come in and played well.
Yeah,
and probably a little better than they thought. So if Källgren gets the call tomorrow night, which I would assume happens, you're comfortable with that. That's not. You're not getting your backup and wondering what's going to happen or what are you going to see out of this guy. But, I think, James, as we were talking earlier, Campbell really is not far off now. And this is the way Keith was talking yesterday. So you don't want your goalie to get hurt at any time. We get that. Mrazek had done well in the time he had been back and a couple of big victories after clearing waivers. But he, You go with Shalgren and assume that Campbell is going to be right back here around the corner.
Well, we hope Campbell's back pretty soon because they got a back-to-back Monday, Tuesday, Lightning.
That's right.
Then the Panthers. That's.
Going into Tampa is
Tampa's
one of
gonna
the
be tough.
loudest. Yeah, Tampa's one of the loudest buildings in the league. Period, and they have that fan base there really gets it going, and I'm sure they will, given what could be on the line on Monday. I know a lot of hockey's to be played, but you could be talking about the team winning the night in second place at the end of that night in the division. So a lot will be there, but we'll have to see. From the way Campbell's trending, that might not be an issue for them for that game, one of those games, because he would be a net for one of them.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what I'm assuming.
You're running Shelgren Hutchin there. That could be a little dicey for them, but
yeah. Again, like me and Terry just said though as well. I mean, you look at the Leafs, Josh. They are comfortably in a playoff spot, whether it's a wild card, third or second, right? So I mean, are the Leafs really stressing that much if they lose one of those games against Tampa or Florida? I don't think so. They have a total of 5 games against teams that they're jockeying with for position, including those 2 games. Another one still against Boston on the horizon. I think another one against Florida later on as well. So they have 2 more visits to Tampa and
Florida each. Yeah. 2 more visits to Tampa and Florida each. So there are a lot of 4-pointers coming. I think that what we're down to now, 5 left now because it was 7 a few days ago before they played the Panthers in Boston.
Yeah,
within the division. So listen, the Leafs want to win every game. Their goal is still to win the division, as difficult as that might seem on the outside. So they do want victories at the end of every night. Of course they do. But you're right. They are in a good spot right now, standings wise. And like I say, the thing too with Campbell, even if he does come back, it's going to take him some time to get back to where he was. I would think, if he does get back to that point. So, what kind of Campbell are we going to see right off the hop? Whether it's against Philly on Saturday or like you say, Josh, one of those 2 games down in Florida on Monday, Tuesday. But excuse me, he is almost there, like I say, and that's the positive you take out of all this with the goaltending situation.
Mm-hmm.
So a question I want to ask you now is about Austin Matthews. I know Josh probably interested in this one as well. He's getting into rarefied air here. He's 1 goal away from 50. There's a lot of different talk of what this guy might be able to do down the stretch here. I think it's 17 games left for the Maple Leafs. 60 is not out of the possibility here. What do you see Austin Matthews ending up with?
Well, he's got what now? 49 and 61?
Yeah, 49 and 61.
So 60 goals is completely reasonable if he keeps this up. I think if I'm Rick Vive, I'm probably enjoying my last week or 2, whatever it is, with the Leaf record. Yeah. Because his name is going to be knocked off if Matthews doesn't get hurt. I mean, that's a given. I think we go to the bank on that one. He's 5 goals away from tying it, 6 from breaking it. And, Rick Vive has held that records for, 40 years, 81, 82?
Yeah, it's a long while.
Well, you know what? Good for Rick Vive. He's a really good person. I've had a chance to talk to him a lot over the years, coaching Mississauga and being part of the Leafs alumni. I really like the guy a lot. But, it appears Matthews set to break that. And, the things Matthews is doing, it's one thing to put the puck in the net as much as he does, but we've seen his game come defensively. And, how many times, guys, have we seen the opposition get the puck and think they're off down the ice, and then it's going right back the other way because of something that Matthews or Marner has done in the neutral zone and tracking whatever it is.
Yeah.
I mean, Matthews' 200-foot game has gone bonkers, man. I love the way he's developed that.
He takes the puck from people almost as commonly as he scores goals, if not more, right? So it's you talk about the 200-foot game, legit Hart Trophy candidate. Obviously, I don't think there's any why people would argue against that. I don't know why they would.
I was going to ask you that question because a lot of people seem to think with that suspension that might knock him down a peg.
Come on, whatever. I mean, look at what he's done in the games he's been in. He's been dominant, and it'd be a special treat for him to get this at home because we know if he doesn't score tomorrow night, it's going to happen on the road in the next 4 games.
Yeah,
it won't happen at Scotiabank Arena in a full building, but he's a special talent. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Generational, all those words you want to use, and the consistency. He's been scoring 40 goals more or less since he broke into the league.
Yeah.
Right? If there's no COVID, guys, we know that this 50 goal talk is already done. We've had this discussion a couple of years ago, and he probably gets another 50 this year already, and that's done. Okay, another 50 goal season. for Matthews, it would have happened. But the things that line is doing as a whole are pretty incredible.
He almost did it last year to shorten season.
Yeah,
I mean, it's crazy.
And he would have done it 2 years ago. What do you have? 47 and 70 when the season ended.
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah,
yeah. So that happens then, and again, probably Vive's record is in jeopardy then. But no, it's it's what I'm going to be curious to see you guys going forward is, if you don't, you want to get Tavares and Nylander going on that second line, or Mikheyev there now. If Nylander gets moved back to it, Tavares, that sort of thing. Does Sheldon Keefe ever get to a point where he thinks maybe I have to break up that top line? You would think not. Just everything that it's done together, and Bunting's been, you can keep your fingers crossed when you sign a Michael Bunting, given his lack of experience in the league. And he's come out. He said it himself. I didn't think I'd produce like this. And he's not a guy playing on that line getting those points because he plays with Matthews and Marner. If that was the case, ask the guy they traded to Arizona why that didn't happen for him. You have to have something a little special to play on that line. Bunting's brought that. But
something too, though, the relationship between Matthews and Bunting. Just watching that little Tinbit video today, the two of them jabbing at each other, and him calling Bunting chubby. Just having fun with it, right? They kind of mesh well together. That might have not worked with Richie. Who knows, right?
Well,
but it seems like they play off each other well.
And it didn't work, or else that trade wouldn't have happened. And we're not talking about Ilya Lyubushkin being a good addition for the Leafs. It didn't work. Like we said earlier, good for Kyle Dubas to get something out of that. But Bunting has been great. I think he's at $950 again next year. If there'll be a better value for the dollar in the NHL next year on any team, I'd love to see it, because if he continues where what he's done this year, he's going to have another great season for the Leafs.
Do you see him winning the Rookie of the Year?
I don't think he will. No.
That's not good for my futures bet, Terry.
Well, I just you have to look at what the defenseman's doing in Detroit on that team.
Sider,
you have to. I mean, come on. I mean, the age. I know we get into the age and everything and all that sort of thing, but Bunting had some seasoning, of course, in the minors. Had the good season with Arizona, of course, but he's going to be in the talk. But I think the age does work against him, and it's not only that, but it's what Sider has done in Detroit is pretty exceptional for a person.
Oh, it's pretty special. The defenseman doing that kind of stuff, yeah.
And the age he's playing, and on that team, I mean, Detroit apparently thinks it's okay to allow 9, 10, 11 goals every so often, and Sider has come through it okay. So, but good for Bunting to get into that conversation, because again, I don't think that we necessarily would have seen that, when he was signed last summer. You want to be an impact player.
Yeah.
He's been excellent for them.
Well, the last question I want to hit you with here, I know Josh is a little bit starving as well. To get something to eat into him. The salary cap talk for the playoffs is something that has come up. It's now being talked about. For you, I want to get your honest opinion here. Do you think there should be a salary cap? I'll say my answer right away. No, there shouldn't be. Only reason why is if you run into a rash of injuries, how do you feel the team if you have to keep pulling guys and put them on? Is there a way to do something to make it fair so teams don't Kucherov or Eichel or whatever name you want to attach to it?
Right.
I'm wondering for you, what do you think?
Well, can you have one without the other? Can you hide guys if that's the way we want to call it, and then have them come back and not have a cap in the playoffs? I'm with you, but I mean, it's how do you get around that if you do have the injuries?
Yeah.
There's no easy answer. There really isn't, I don't think. And I would imagine it's an issue that the NHL and the PA are likely going to wrestle with here.
I can see them. I mean, the thing I struggle with, if the players aren't being paid, how are you enforcing a salary cap? That was kind of weird to me. But also, if you wanted to do something like this, you have your, whatever it is, 23-man roster for the playoff that's cap compliant. And then if you have someone on IR, you can activate them in the playoffs, but someone on your 23-man roster has to come off to replace that player. So if there was an injury, let's say, in the playoffs when they did the Kucherov situation, let's say Braden Point goes down and he has to be put on IR. Okay, but now we can activate Kucherov because we pretty much switched out Point for Kucherov.
Right.
Might be a start. I'm not paid to make this decision, but that's how I envision it. Like you have a sort of like the taxi squad, right? You can move guys back and forth. That way you're not enforcing a salary cap. It's more of a player limit. And then you have 5, 6, 7 guys that you can draw from, maybe throw a goalie spot on there in case, you're the Leafs and Mrazek pulls his groin again in game 6. Like it's anything like that could see them maybe enforcing that. But outside of that, you're gonna have to get pretty damn creative with it.
Well, you will, depending what road the league decides to go down. If they do decide to change it at any point, but there seems to be some sort of appetite for that, and then how if you decide to stick with a cap type thing, does that loosen a bit, if you will, when the playoffs start? I mean, it's like I say, it's a question that doesn't have a lot of easy answers to it, and you don't like to see what happened last year with Tampa. You skirt around it. Obviously, we see what happens, but again, that's not something that's happening commonly. And James, to your earlier point about the injuries and that sort of thing, cap or not, teams have made do with injuries in the playoffs, and they do get through them. I don't have a list in front of me. I haven't done the research on it, but I would imagine that every single team that has won the Stanley Cup in the past X amount of years, they get by without players who otherwise should be in the lineup, right? Who are hurt, and they managed to make it work. So I think in that regard, the playing field is kind of equal or level, if you will, because you don't know going in where the injuries are going to occur for what teams. So you have that X factor going into it, but I don't know. The other thing too with the CBA is as well research, as well put together as these things are and everything. We see the loopholes all the time, and how do you close that? If you close one here, there's another one open over here.
It always is. There's always people looking for those, right? I mean,
right, and that's what people are paid to do it. Your capologist is paid to do that.
Yeah,
find a way to make this work.
Yeah, that's what you're paid to do. Make it work.
Yeah, guy in Toronto is good at it. Brandon Prado, of course, he had a hand in writing the CBA and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So he has that history of it, but you pay those people to do that, and you go forward. And if you have the right person in place to help you get through those things, then maybe you don't worry about it so much. But it's certainly an issue that's not going anywhere. We know that now.
No, for sure. Well, let's close the loop here tonight. The Toronto Maple Leafs, obviously, right now battling for that third or second seed right now in the Atlantic. Where do you see this team finishing up, Terry? Do you see them in the top 1, 2, or 3 of the Atlantic, or wild card?
I see them in the top 3. I do. I think if they can, there ifs with everything. I understand that, but you have to have encouragement by the way they played the last 3 games at least. And I go back to the Montreal game where they win that game if not for Jake Allen. So they're doing a lot of good things structurally in that one. They've done a lot of good things structurally in their last 2 victories against Florida and Boston. I'll be surprised if they fall into a wild card spot. I really will. I know that, like I said, I know there's questions with the goaltending. How's Campbell going to be when he comes back? What's the status of Raza going forward? But the Leafs are doing some good things now from the crease out and getting back to some of the things they were doing earlier in the season that have been missing. You keep that going. You like the way Giordano's come in and shorted up. You like the way Lyubushkin's come in and played. So there are a lot of factors here that had been missing in January, February that they didn't have. And, they're coming together. You don't want to forget a guy like Blackwell. I think he did some better things last night playing center. But I see them being in the top 3 when it's all done. Do they finish?
I really like what Blackwell's brought to the squad. I like the board play. I like the way he digs out the puck. I like the way he's not afraid, even at his size, that people knock him for at 5'9". He's still willing to go in there and battle and dig and do all those things that we love here in Leafs Nation. So yes, no, I see them in second in the Atlantic, and I really want to see them play Boston. That's the opponent. I guess that's the final question I'll pose to both of you. Who's your most sought-after opponent for the Toronto Maple Leafs? Is it the Carolina Hurricanes with Freddie Anderson? Is it Boston to slay the Dragon? Or is it Tampa just to say that you beat the Cup champs and move on?
Well, out of the 4 possibilities, I guess, I don't know if you throw the Rangers or Penguins into that, depending what happens in the other division. To me, the most enticing one would be Carolina. Just with the Anderson history.
Yep.
I know that there's an appetite to get past the Boston hurdle in the fan base. That's fine. I just think it'd be fascinating to see what would happen if they faced Anderson in the first round.
Yeah,
they can play with Carolina. The Leafs have come a long way from where they were in October when Keith made that comment about what a contender looks like. The Leafs have come a long way from that. They beat Carolina recently, of course, and To me, that would be the juiciest matchup. I think I really do. Tampa, their cap's fine, whatever. They have the experience, but when you're facing the guy in net who couldn't help you get it done in the previous 5 seasons, that to me would be the most alluring.
Mm-hmm.
Now, tell me I'm wrong. What do you guys think?
I like it.
Where do you go first?
Well, I want Boston in the first round just to kind of get past that demons. Like we all saw that famous line from the documentary, but you kind of convinced me with your Carolina one. I think that would be a lot of fun because we can finally get Game 7 Freddie just on the other side.
Well, yeah, I just think it'd be very fascinating to see how that goes. I mean, Carolina, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying by saying that the Leafs would win that series. Definitely, Carolina's a hell of a hockey team. Rod Brind'Amour is a hell of a coach, but that's the thing with this, guys. There's none of the 4 opponents you can say, okay, well, that would be the easiest because you can make an argument for all 4 of them quite simply, just like you can for the Maple Leafs. So I think any draw is going to be a lot of fun to watch and cover. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But like I say, you're going against the guy that you know so well. We know the relationship that he has with number 34. That hasn't gone anywhere. I just think that'd be a lot of fun to see how that would unfold over what I assume would be a 6 or 7 game series.
Yeah.
No, there'd be a lot of meat on the bone in that one, especially the way, like you said, Carolina plays, the way they're coached. But same thing, Keefe is tired of being told he's outcoached. You look at the past couple playoffs he's had, it's been, he's got outcoached by X or outcoached by who. So now he probably wants to do the same thing. I think it's the juiciest too because of the Freddie thing. And we'll see. Does Freddie falter or does Freddie stand on his head and put the Leafs out yet again in the first round? That's what the intrigue is going to be. And that's why the playoffs are pretty much kooky dukes because you never know what's going to happen. You just go and watch it and enjoy it.
Agreed. I mean, look what happened a few years ago when Columbus eliminated Tampa in the first round of 4, right?
Yep. Got the brooms out and swept them. Caught lightning in a bottle.
Has lightning lost since? It just it is we're all going to make predictions on May 1st before any of these things start. And it's always fun to look back 2 weeks later and say, what the hell was I thinking? Or I was right on that one. But that's what makes it so much fun. I
like what Jamal Mayers said on the, I think it was either the Sportsnet panel or the TSN, whatever one it was, about the scar tissue. And that Matthews and Marner and all these guys now have a lot of scar tissue. And that'll help them going through this playoffs. And that'll help build them, and run through this playoffs. And they look like a completely different machine than they did last year, in my opinion, the way that they play. So I'm excited for the playoffs. I'm excited for no matter who it is. Just get there, get healthy, and I want to see this rock and roll.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. Stay healthy before the playoffs start. And you know what? It's interesting now, how the Leafs have where they are in the overall standings. And everyone was saying last year they're doing it because it was North Division. They didn't have tough opponents. Well, here they are, a year later, and they've acquitted themselves quite well.
Yeah.
And hey, listen, I'm like everyone else. I know that the proof comes in the playoff pudding. We get that. But I'd rather be talking about this Leaf team now and what they've done for this regular season than a team that's struggling at 8 or 9 trying to bang their way into the playoffs. That's not what the Leafs are.
No, I agree with you 100%. Well, I can't wait for the playoffs to kick off. We will have you back on before they do to search out what matchup they got going on and who's going to win and what's going to happen there and get your predictions throughout. But Terry, you're always so gracious with your time. I want to thank you very much for jumping on with us tonight.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. Always good to talk Leafs and hockey with you.
Yeah, sounds good.
There you go.
Thanks, Terry.
Well, this is Offside Hockey Talk, where hockey comes to talk. Proudly brought to you by Boxing Rock Brewing Co. Puck off Laugardale. Get yourself some when you get out east. All right, guys, we'll catch you later.